So I had the good fortune of persuading my wife to join me on a rally school recently, a couple of weeks ago. It was one of the things that was on my bucket list. Growing up in the UK, you grew up watching rallies all the time, and it's something I'd always wanted to do. And so the opportunity presented itself, and so we went and did rally school together. And I'm a bit of a car nut. I race cars every weekend, so this was just kind of a cool thing to do. And as I was preparing for today's event, it occurred to me there's a lot of things that you learn at rally school that are very similar to the things you learn in digital transformation. And so I kind of thought it would be kind of cool to just draw the parallels between the two. And the first thing that you kind of learn at rally school is that you can't just approach a corner without a strategy. You can't approach a corner without thinking about how you're going to exit the corner, because that determines the line you take into the corner. So you have to have a strategy for how you take each corner, but not just one corner at a time. You have to see the whole course and understand how you're going to plan ahead. Which is why if you ever watch rallies, you'll hear the co-driver reading out numbers, and that's telling the driver what the next corner on the corner after is, how far it is, how severe the turn is, what kind of gradients it's over, etc. So they can plan ahead and think about how they want to enter the corner and exit it. And the parallel is with transformation. It should be obvious that we can't think about digital transformation without having a clear strategy as to where we're trying to get to, what's the outcome we're trying to get to as a business, and what are the different steps that are going to take us to get there. And so strategy becomes critical. Do we get a clicker or not? On its way, okay. So, do we get the next slide? So when you think about strategy, it's not surprising that when we interview and do research with executives, people say yes. Process is critical to strategy, right? So, or process, depending on which side of the Atlantic you're on. So if process is critical to strategy, you'd expect companies to be thinking about transformation and what they want to do and how they want to get there. Next slide, please. Thank you. And so when you look at the numbers, it's kind of interesting to see that the digital transformation is sort of the focus of process improvement in the near future. When you look at 2 years ago, the focus is on cost reduction. And then now it's like, okay, we're getting towards improvement in cost reduction, improving customer experience now, and then we're moving towards accelerating digital business transformation. Well, customer experience and business transformation, if you remember from this morning, are intricately intertwined, right? They're bound together. You can't do digital transformation without understanding customer experience. And in fact, most transformation that people do is in order to improve the customer outcomes, the customer experience. And so, yes, we might be looking 2 years from now saying that we expect transformation to take the priority, but in fact, customer experience should always be there. Thank you very much. All right, good job. All right, so let's see if this works. There we go. So the goals for process design optimization have got to change inside an organization. As you think about moving through and evolving your operational processes, you see these things change as companies mature in their digital maturity. As we look at analyzing different companies and trying to assess their maturities, the less mature companies in digital journey, where a lot of companies start out, they start out with this approach of what we describe as digital bolt-on, adding digital capabilities to the existing business. But as you mature, the transformation starts to look at how you deliver these customer outcomes, which I talked about this morning. So you've got this sort of shifting maturity of customer outcomes. And you start to look further and further down to the future in terms of your strategy, planning ahead. And this is similar to Rally School. This is an example of the sort of interesting stuff you do at Rally School. Now, you're supposed to drive around the cones, interestingly enough. When you first get into a car and try and drive around cones, the instinctive thing is to look at the cone in front of you and try and drive around it. And that's actually the worst thing you can do, because it puts you into a very bad position for getting around the next cone. So what you have to do is look at where you need to exit a cone and get into the next cone. So you've got to look ahead and plan your route. And the same is true with this sort of tactical bolt-on digital transformation. Because what we get with tactical bolt-on transformation is we tend to look at the problems immediately in front of us. Like, how do we solve this immediate customer problem? And we can tactically go and fix that today And we can do that very quickly. So we go after that next problem, and then the next one, and the next one. But if we keep doing that, we don't end up with the best optimum route to the outcome that we're trying to get for the customer. Whereas if you see all of the cones tied together as a road that you have to take through the cones to get to the exit, you start to be able to plan a different route. This is why having a clear vision of what you're trying to do for the customer and how you're trying to get to that outcome is really important, because then you can determine, is each tactical change that we do along the way helping us get to that outcome, or is it in fact maybe taking us away from what we're trying to get to? Because each tactical change may be improving incremental value for the customer, but it may not get you to where you want to go long term. So it's really important to think about the long-term strategy. And the transformation metrics that people use are shifting, right? So we start to see people looking at the benefits from transformations, things like increasing customer lifetime value and expanding into new markets. And we're starting to see people use these metrics to determine, is our transformation being successful? Are we increasing the lifetime customer value? Now, lifetime customer value is very hard to measure, but it's one of the most important measures you can get at, because if you're not consistently delivering value on an ongoing basis, you'll start to see the customers move away and that lifetime customer value drops off. So you start to see this shift in not only the goals and what we're trying to achieve, but how we're measuring that progress towards that outcome. And then you see this shift from these linear value chains, I mentioned this morning, towards these API-enabled value ecosystems. And when you look at these sort of that transition, you start to see a lot of changes going on inside the operations of a business. So it's not just about changing the customer experience, it's about how do we change the operations. And we have to think about changing processes and designing them with different outcomes in mind. So most of the processes that we have inside the business were designed for operational efficiency, plain and simple. I mean, you look at most businesses, the way we design processes, or how do we make it most efficient? Most efficient isn't necessarily best for the customer. It's usually best for the company, and sometimes the customer suffers as a result. And I'm quite sure you've all experienced, we've all had some kind of experience where we've as an individual, we've experienced some level of service with a company where you look at it and think, this was not designed with the customer in mind, right? This was designed for the business because this sucks as a customer experience, right? So this is what, when you get to thinking about how do we redesign the operational process, it's about designing the operational process, not necessarily to be inefficient, you still want the efficiency, but you want to make sure you test everything against the outcome that it's delivering for the customer. How is it going to impact the customer? And so you start seeing these new techniques being used. They're not really new, but they're new to us, to a lot of people, especially to IT. Customer journey mapping and design thinking, not many IT groups have been using over the last few years. It's now becoming a sort of a requirement for IT groups to use these, and often they're bringing them into the operational side of the business as well. Journey mapping has been used by customer experience professionals for many years, and design thinking has really been limited to design companies, but that's been around for many years as well. But the whole point of design thinking is the ability to create empathy for the customer, understand what the outcomes are that the customer is trying to get to. And journey mapping is a great way of understanding the challenges the customers have to get to what the outcome they're getting to today. The challenge with journey mapping is if you apply it just to today's experience, so a lot of companies, when they take journey mapping, they'll say, okay, we're going to map our customer's journey, interaction with the company, with our brand, with our products, from when they start interest in wanting to buy one of our products to when they've purchased it and the post-purchase experience. We'll map that journey. But that's not the customer's journey. That's your inside-out view of the customer's journey. The customer's journey is a journey towards an outcome that your products and services are helping them get to. It's much bigger than what the interaction is with your company. So you need to think about the entire journey that they have toward the outcome and how you help them get there. So journey mapping is very important to do. And in that process, you start to understand all the touch points the customer has with your products and services and the systems that sit behind those. Now, some of those processes are manual, some of them are paper-based, some of them are digital. But the idea is to understand the impact of the customer at every single touch point and the processes that sit behind it to say, how can we help the customer get to the outcome better for the customer? And that might mean actually removing some touch points. There are many things that we do with customers that we ask customers for data, for example, about the customer that we already know. And nothing infuriates a customer more than wasting their time, right? If the customer's already given us data and we ask them for the same data again, that's infuriating. Anybody been to the doctor and experienced this, where you go to the doctor and the nurse says, well, what's wrong with you? And you tell the nurse what's wrong with you, and they write it all down. And you go and you see the next person in the line, and they ask you what's wrong with you, and you tell them. Eventually you get to the doctor, and the doctor says, what's wrong with you? And I'm like, don't you guys talk to each other? Now, the doctors will tell you there's a reason why they do this. They want to hear firsthand from you. They don't want to have it, they don't want to have the sort of it repeated from somebody else. So there's a reason, but it feels infuriating, right, as a customer on the other end. Well, think about when you ask your customers for data that you already have, and they know you already have them, right? It's like, why are you asking me this stuff? Yeah, you need something to verify who I am. After that, don't ask me. There's a classic story of, the bank that calls a customer at home, and as they call up and say, we got some questions about your account. We just need to verify who you are. I'm like, you called me. So think about the touch points and the touch points you need to improve your the process. We heard this morning talk about Agile and how important Agile is. There is not a single company that is doing a successful digital transformation that has not fully embraced Agile. Right? And we see, one of the interesting things I mentioned this morning about how the early research I was looking at CMOs and CIOs and that relationship way back in 2010 and how those companies were changing the way they operated. We actually saw companies where the CIO would introduce the marketing team to Agile. And the marketing team would look at that and they'd start embracing Agile for running marketing projects and marketing campaigns. Because they realized it was a better way to run what they were doing. And then the Agile thinking would just go through the whole business. So it's not just about changing IT operations, it's about using that same kind of thinking, the ability to create an agile business, the ability to think quickly and make rapid decisions, starts to change the culture of the organization and allow you to get to the innovation that you need to get to. So when you think about innovation, the innovation really happens at this intersection of operations and customer experience. A lot of focus has been around digital experiences, and that's great, that's the low-hanging fruit. The real juice of this, the real profits to extract out of this, and the value you can create for customers to drive revenue is in the combination, the intersection between experiences and operations. Because if you remember, our operations are designed for operational efficiency. If we redesign those operations to create value for customers, we're going to completely rethink how those operations run, how we run the business to create value for the customer. It's a different way of thinking about the business. So we estimate about 20% of innovation is going to be in the customer-facing side of things. 80% of the innovation you're going to see is in the operational side of things and across your businesses. It's a very broad generalization, but it's to give you a feel for just how much opportunity there is behind that sort of operational wall. And you start to see companies playing with this. I mentioned GE today. They've been doing a lot of this, along with companies like Siemens do a lot of work with digital twins. This ability to take very complex industrial plants or machinery like turbines and pack them with sensors and map that into sort of create a digital image of the real world, if you like, that you can start to model, run analytics modeling on, and then do predictive analytics on those models. That allows you to not only predict maintenance and component failure, but in things like turbines, allows the operator to tune the turbine performance in real time, to change parameters, things like how fast it ramps up when it's been stopped, or the speed of acceleration, deceleration, can change the wear and tear on particular components such that they can extend the life of a turbine by, say, slowing down its peak performance a little bit, extending the life of a turbine by a month, that allows them to get into a different repair period and drastically reduce the cost of repair and maintenance than it would if they just ran it at a normal basis. So you've got some huge operational changes that you can make to get improvements. And I mentioned Carnival Cruise Lines this morning. That's an operational, it's a bolt-on, but it's an operational change as well. Think about the operational changes in process on a cruise ship you need to go through in order to be able to enable that kind of digital medallion to work for customers. A massive amount of process change behind the scenes that has to make that happen. So of all of those things that I went through today, you see that sort of behind that operational change, this is kind of a map, the heat map of where most transformation happens today. The red is essentially where most things are happening. The blue is cold, it's where things are not happening so much. And you see that most of the focus of transformation has been on IT processes and on sales and marketing. And there's a lot of opportunity around the supply chain, manufacturing, and even the financial services inside a company. So a lot of the things that are not facing customers, we've yet to touch inside of many organizations. So there's a lot of opportunity there for change around business process. So in the US, the estimates are we'll need about 500,000 new developers during the next decade, and the patterns in Western Europe kind of follow suit, right? So if you think about the number of skilled developers that we need, there are just not enough people in the world that have these skills to be able to fulfill the needs. So if you're finding it hard to acquire talent in terms of software talent, you're not alone, and it's not going to get easier. It's just going to get harder. And it doesn't matter how many people the universities pump out, they won't be able to pump out enough. So the challenge is, how do we change the game, right? How do we change the game plan so that we're not constantly focused on the sort of software development as it used to be? So we need new approaches, right? So what we've ended up seeing is sort of this embrace of there's the low code and no code platforms, and then there's the middle ground. Sort of this process complexity has to be solved in the middle ground. So if you think about the high end, this top end is traditional IT processes, then the middle ground is ripe for opportunity for thinking about how do we redesign and redevelop and re-engineer the software that goes to support that. And the way to think about this is if BPM sort of met the needs of IT at the top end, it's a bit like designing the race car. You know, you need a specialist team to design a Formula One car, and it's got a specialist purpose it's being driven for. It's designed solely for that purpose, and it's pretty useless at putting that car on the road. You'd never be able to drive it on the road. If you take low code, no code, low code platforms, they're great. They're really, really useful. They sort of get in a car and be able to drive it. Anybody can drive it, right? So think about it as that's your regular car. But you actually need to be able to build something in the middle here too, to handle some more complex processes that are a bit more challenging, but you don't want to make it so sophisticated as you've got to build a Formula One car for it. And that's kind of my rally car analogy, right? So you're trying to build a car that can drive on the road, but it can also handle some really complex challenges, right? And that's what I would consider the rally car is kind of the digital process automation that you start to see appear in the marketplace, and what you're learning a lot about today. So when you think about these new approaches, they're going to address this long tail of development, the number of apps that we have inside an organization that we really just don't have the time inside IT to focus the scarce resources of the IT group on the things that need to be changed. We want the IT group focused on the things that really create customer value, that drive revenue growth, because that's a very scarce resource. That's why we want to be building the Formula One car. The rest of the organization, we want to try and optimize and make as agile as possible, and use and embrace as many people as we can to help build the process automation that goes through that. So that's really important to try and, if you think about it, you've got the sort of the Formula One cars coming out of IT, and you've got the rally car and the regular car that's being used around the rest of the business that you really want to have everybody embrace and drive to try and get the outcome. But you can't do this alone, right? IT can't do this alone, and the lines of business can't do it alone. So this is something else you learn at rally school. I always thought, well, rally, you've got the rally driver, you've got a navigator, and they're just driving on the road and they're having a ball, and that's great, except nearly every rally, something breaks. And so you can't actually enter a rally. You've got to have a co-driver, and you've got to have a support team. You're not allowed to enter the rally without a support team. And the support team is there to fix what breaks, right? And I think there's a useful analogy in business, right? You could have an automated platform, but you have to have some experts around to help fix what breaks. And that's really important. So you have to have the support team. So in this context, you want to have the IT group act like the rally support team. Yes, you've got the drivers out there going as fast as they can down the road to try and get to their objectives, but every so often they're going to need things fixing. they're going to need help to get that car back on the road. And that's one of the new roles that IT has to be able to take on, is that ability to provide that support to help them get to the outcomes that they need to get to. So in the sort of rally analogy, you've got the driver who drives the car. In business, you've got the business leader who drives change. You have the co-driver who navigates. Well, in the business, you've probably got a business architect that helps navigate the change, right? So you're seeing a lot more business architects come to the fore. Support team prepares the car and fixes the problems, while the IT team provides the technical support and security that you need to make sure that nothing goes off the rails. And your car provides the platform to go fast and win. Well, you have to have a platform in order to be able to create this capability inside the business. So you need a digital process automation platform to be able to help accelerate the transformation across the business. And that's why you see a lot of companies looking at these kind of platforms that are appearing. And I'm not allowed to mention names, but there's a reason why you're all here, right? So 3 characteristics of digital process automation: saves time, removes pain, and it's innovative. It allows you to create innovative solutions. And so that's a key component of digital transformation. And when you think about changing the business operations to help drive customer outcomes, you have to be able to have something that can accelerate that change inside the business. We can't keep doing it the way we've been doing it for 20 years or 30 years. We have to change the modus operandi. So a digital process automation platform can help do that. The way to think of it is it spans this gap between the deep sort of structured stuff that you see from IT and the wide, fast sort of low code, anybody go off and do what they want things. It gives you that ability to span those two and bridge the gap between digital customer experience and digital operational excellence. So a really important component. But I don't want to underplay the move to low code, because low code is an important component here as well. So you need 3 cars in the business. You've got to build this sort of team which has the Formula One car, the rally car, and the regular street car, right? And you can't just do this with 2 of them. You need kind of that ability to give people something they can get in and drive. If I learn how to drive one car and get in and drive any car, right? They all operate on the same principle. Right? They all have the same steering wheel. They have pedals. Some have 3, some have 2. So there's a little bit of difference there. But they have the pedals, right? We know how to drive one car. We can pretty much get in and drive any car. If you know how to drive a stick shift or a manual, depending on which side of the pond you're on, then you know how to drive any car. If you don't know how to drive an automatic, then you know how to drive most cars, right? Unless you go to Europe. So yes, you need to have this equivalent of the car. So this is the low-code platform. And we see the move to low-code accelerating. When you look at the data that we get from research studies, we can see that the number of people using low-code platforms and adopting low-code platforms is accelerating very quickly. So there's a reason for that. There's a benefit in it. It's vital to these projects. So the ability to have process owners, experts get involved in managing their own change in outcomes. It gives them that ability to figure it's like giving them a car. They can get in and drive it. Once they learn how to do it once, they can do it time and time again. Well suited to agile and modern development processes, because it takes away the need to support a lot of those changes from the app dev team, right? They can empower people to go and make those changes. Ensures your quick delivery and app evolution, addresses complex applications as needed, right? And adopt integrating multiple sources and functions. So it's the ability to bring all this together and empower savvy business users to be able to do that change. And we've seen attempts to do this over the years. I think now we're getting to a point where this, with the platforms we have available today, they are as sophisticated as they ever have been, and they're starting to allow that capability into the business and not have it go like the Wild West. I'm old enough to remember when Access came out, and everybody said, "Oh, this is great. We'll just give it to everybody, and they can build their own little systems, and it's fine. Everything will be wonderful." And those of us who lived through that know that everything wasn't wonderful, and it was all chaos and all hell broke loose. So you need a platform that you can put constraints around, that you can manage the security and embed security into it. And this is where these low-code platforms really do come to the fore. It needs to provide a solid foundation, right? So you've got to integrate it to your systems of record. You can't just let it hang out on its own. It's got to be able to handle the complexity of changing processes, because processes are evolving, right? They're changing and evolving continuously. had a conversation with an executive who was asking me, like, why do things take so long in IT, and why do we end up with so many things in IT, and why do things keep changing? And I said, well, how often are you hiring people? What's your attrition rate on employees? About 10%. Okay, so, and how many middle managers do you have? Oh, about 1,000. Okay, so you're hiring 100 middle managers a year. Okay, and you're hiring those people. When you ask those people, if you ask them this question, did we bring you in to leave things alone, or do we bring you in to change things? What do you think they're going to answer? Most people are going to come in and say, yeah, you brought me in because of my expertise. I brought in, you want me to come and change things. I mean, why hire me if you just want me to leave things alone, right? So they come in with the mindset of, I've got to change stuff. What can they change? People, process, technology. Right, so they go and hire the best people they can. Assume they've already got the best people. By the way, those people they hire, they come in with their ideas about what to change, right? So they're left with changing process and technology. If you change process, you end up changing the underlying technology anyway. All of that ends up in IT, right? And you've got this constant pattern of change. And invariably, a lot of companies will end up changing things to things the way they were like 10 years ago. Right? You just go through this cycle because there's only so many ways you can change things. But this is why process keeps changing, because we're always nibbling at it to try and improve it in some way. And one of the speakers said today, well, we took too long on our project initially, and we found that things had changed. Well, that's why waterfall doesn't work, right? The classic cartoon about, well, we asked somebody what they wanted, then we went away and we tried to figure out what we did. Remember the swing cartoon where they have the swing that ends up, so you know what I'm talking about. So the reason why it doesn't work is it takes too long, and you can't go, it's not iterative. You can't go back and show people. This is why Agile is so important. But this is why you need to be able to handle these complex changing processes, because processes are guaranteed to change, because we keep hiring people. So they're going to keep changing things. So we have to have a platform that's able to keep changing in a way that doesn't require us to just completely redevelop and change complex applications and then have to support those changes, because we can't keep doing that. And we've got to be able to ensure governance and compliance, right? We can't just let people go and it's not going to be the Wild West. It's got to be secure. We know security is important because if we want to maintain trust of customers, we have to make sure that their customer data is secure. So we have to make sure it's secure and private. And it's got to be consistent enough to leverage the skills we make and investments we make in the technology and the architecture. So low code is really important as a foundation. And it should take a lot of the burden, if it's designed and implemented well, it should take a lot of the burden off IT, DevOps, and let them focus on the things that can really create value for customers. So you can use digital process automation to accelerate transformation. You can recognize business people, know their business best, right? So one of the things that really niggles me, there are a few things. One of them is when I go and hear a company talk about IT and the business, it doesn't matter whether it's somebody from IT or somebody from the line of business. It just bothers me either way, because I haven't met a single company yet where IT was somehow separated from the business and set up as a separate business and a vendor. But people talk about it like it is. And the challenge with that is it changes the culture inside the organization. Once you get that kind of phrasing inside the organization, IT and the business, now everybody in IT thinks that they're separate from the business. Everybody in business thinks that IT is separate from the business. No, IT is part of the business. It always has been. Just a lot of people lost sight of that along the way, and they started thinking about, oh, we need to provide service as a service provider, and we have customers, and our customers are inside the company, and no, the customers are the people that pay the bills outside the company, and you never want to lose sight of that, because that's the people you have to create value for. And the reason why everybody in IT comes to work every day is not to create value for the employees, it's to create value for the end customer at the end of the day. And so we have to keep that focus. And that's all part of the culture change that goes along with with digital transformation. There has to be a transformation in many of the IT shops, because over the years they've gotten to this supplier service kind of mentality that really has to be changed. Embracing the line of business employees as development partners. Once you get into that understanding that we're all in business together, some of us have specialist expertise, and we want to get together and sit around the table and figure out how to deliver that outcome for the customer, then everybody can work together as the same team. Make the development process predictable and repeatable. Yeah, that's very important. And we've got to build a support organization that makes that successful. Think of the rally team and that team to be able to fix things when they go wrong. So support organization is really, really important in being able to do that. And so the final thing I want to leave you with, I'm going through this pretty fast, but hopefully I'm still on schedule and get some Q&A, is don't be afraid of going fast, which is the final thing you kind of learn at rally school, right? I mean, you get in a car and you said, okay, you know, go fast on this dirt road, and yes, you can make this corner. Well, it's kind of counterintuitive, and it runs against every instinct that you have, that you're flying to this corner on a dirt road at 70 miles an hour, and you're actually going to be able to turn the car around and get it to go around when it's sliding all over the place. But eventually you learn to have confidence that you're going to be able to do that. It's the same thing in digital transformation. When you start going fast, it feels really, really uncomfortable. And you worry about the mistakes that you're going to make, and you worry about all the problems that are going to happen, because that's kind of the mindset you get into. But over time, you get to understand that it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to learn as we go. And that's the way we're going to be able to go fast and create a better outcome for customers. And so going fast is really important, but keep it on the road. That's the other important thing. All right, so I think we've got some time for some questions. Any thoughts, things you want to ask about? Yeah.
You talked about customer journey mapping. Are there any toolkits or anything? How would you approach that whole customer journey mapping?
There are actually some software tools available you can use for journey mapping. They'll help they'll help essentially document the journey mapping process. Many of the consulting firms have actually built their own journey mapping tools to help their teams that are working on that. And many vendors are trying to build up journey mapping capabilities as well to help you with that. There are some specialist advisory firms that will work around customer experience research and journey mapping research. So if you're looking at that, I'd encourage you to think about one of those specialist companies that can at least get you started and do some coaching around journey mapping. And if you just wanted to get going, I don't know if NewGen has journey mapping workshops. Forrester certainly does. We can help you with journey mapping workshops as well. So yeah, good question.
You talked about digital twins, right? How much it is reality compared to concept, right?
How much of digital twins is reality? It is very much a reality. So GE's using it in their own businesses, they're selling it inside their turbines that they sell to customers. So they're selling that capability of using digital twins. And if you go on their website, you'll see some case studies written up about those. Siemens are actually using digital twins to not only model sort of things like turbine processes, but they're modeling entire manufacturing processes with a digital twin of the manufacturing process. So that if they're trying to help a company set up a manufacturing plant, they'll not only plan out the plant and the operations of all the machines, they'll build a digital model of that, and then they'll optimize the model and run it and test it, and test for the extremes, so they can know exactly how that plant's going to perform before they build it, and tune it operationally before they build it. So this concept of building a digital twin is very important from the point of view of not having to learn after you've built a physical product. So yeah, it's out there. Yeah.
And so marketing typically will develop a set of personas, and they use that for their marketing purposes. Do you think IT should be using the same personas and trying to map what we're doing to those same kind of personas, or do we develop our own personas?
Good question.
The journey map starts with basically personas.
Yeah. And in fact, I don't know if you remember the innovation canvas I showed this morning, but that whole left side is essentially about developing a persona. So I don't like to use the term because people get hung up on it. So if you don't know about developing a persona, a lot of marketers will develop personas about different customer segments, and it's essentially creating a fictitious person and all the characteristics of that customer, of that particular customer type. Within a persona. And it's very useful for being able to plan what you're delivering to match the needs and the desired outcomes of that person or the persona. You should be using the one that marketing develops. And in fact, ideally, what you should do is develop it with marketing. So you have a set of customers that you're trying to reach. Now the challenge you might, especially around strategic planning, is that you have a set of customers you're satisfying today, but they may not be the customers you're trying to satisfy tomorrow, right? think of the auto industry. If you're in the auto industry, you have a set of customers today, all of us who buy cars. If you're thinking long term in the auto industry, 10 or 15 years out, you know your customers are going to change. Because as you get to autonomous driving, it's going to be a completely different set of customers who own the asset. Right? Many of us will consume the asset through a subscription model, but somebody else is going to own it. They'll be selling cars still, but somebody else is going to own it. So the customer outcomes that customer is going to look for are going to be completely different. So you need to build those kind of personas with marketing, with the lines of business, to understand strategically where you're trying to go to and where your existing customers are today, and then evolve your outcome models around those personas. Good question. Thanks. Any others? Yeah, one.
Having seen the automated code generators, 4GL, 5GL, how real is low code? This wave of low
Oh, you tell me. How real is low code? I don't know. You guys sell it.
In terms of adoption, okay, to do serious application work, when we talk about something like lending, etc., where there's a lot of business rules, I personally don't see low code playing a big role. But for the lower end, I see it playing a
Right.
tail end, I see the big end. So
Yeah.
how real is it for serious application work?
I don't think it's real at all for serious application work. That's why I said you need the 3 tiers, right? So you got the Formula One car, it's a serious application work. You got your digital processing, sort of the digital apps in the middle, so the platforms, the digital process automation apps in the middle, kind of stuff that NewGen provides. That's going to do the bulk of the stuff that's on that sort of beginning of the long tail. And the low code satisfies all the crap at the bottom end.
It is the long tail remains its focus.
Yeah. Yeah. Just like you're not going to put a Formula One car on a highway, but you have an awful lot of cars on the highway, right? It's a lot of people driving. Well, it's the same kind of analogy. You've got millions of people driving cars, right? So low code. You've got thousands of people running cars, but not so many, right? But it's a specialist kind of niche. And you've got 100 people who can drive a Formula One car, right? It's the scale is that's why the analogy kind of works nicely, because the long tail of business apps is kind of your people driving cars on the road. Yeah.
One final one. In your presentation in the morning, you talked about need and what I desire, so that equation. And when you spoke about desire, you spoke about something that has feelings in it. So, and you also spoke about design thinking. So, is there a current mismatch, because design thinking and desires are more artistic in nature, and the way we generally think in business is slightly different. We look at statistics, we look at things. So, is there a gap that you currently see, and is that essential to fulfill, or what?
Yeah, it's a great question, and not many people think about this. So, hands off to you for thinking about it. So there's an interesting thing I've observed over the years in looking at companies, and you may see this in your own company. When you look at how you measure employees, most employees in most companies are measured based on doing things. How well they do tasks, right? Now the reason why I suspect most employees are measured on how well they do tasks is the people who do really well at tasks get promoted. And when they get promoted into management, the metrics they put on their teams are the things that they feel comfortable measuring, which are tasks. And so the more people the higher people get in the organization, they're still very task-oriented, right? So if you look at Myers-Briggs, if you look at the sort of the analysis of Myers-Briggs, the people who end up in executive teams in organizations are the people who are very task-oriented, and they're very good at doing these sort of task-oriented things. And so most companies' metrics of employees are designed to measure task production. Now, you observe that many creative people are not good at that. I may be putting words in your mouth. But this is my observation too, that a lot of creative people tend not to be good at task production. And sometimes you'll see, and Myers-Briggs kind of bears this out. And so, if you look at a highly task-oriented person, they've probably got a very clean desk, very neat, very process-oriented. They're very good at doing their stuff. And then you have your most creative engineer who's thinking out of the box and stuff. And you go over to his desk, and it's a pile full of papers all over the place. It's a complete mess. And you're like, I can never show a customer this. And so you got this sort of different kind of styles. And the challenge is that most organizations don't have any way of measuring the creative employee. We're still trying to measure the creative employee using task measures. And that's a terrible measure for creative employees. And what ends up happening is you look at the creative employee and say, well, you're not doing very good on these tasks we're measuring you on, so we're not going to promote you. And eventually they get frustrated and bored, and they go off and go somewhere else where they can feel their creativity is more valued. And so many organizations end up managing out of the organization their most creative people. And you end up with an organization that's great at doing a lot of tasks, but not very creative, not very innovative. And so they can be operationally very efficient, but not very innovative. And so when we talk to companies about how do you create an innovative culture, one of the first things I'll talk to them about is, well, have you looked at your metrics? How are you measuring success of employees? How are you actually motivating employees to be creative, to be innovative, to not worry about making a mistake, right? Because most companies, when you make a mistake, you're shown the door, right? And so it's starting to change that culture to help people understand that you can't just measure everybody the same way. So that's a very good question.
Thank you.
Well, thanks very much. I think it's probably, well, one more, okay.
One quick follow-up from that.
Yeah.
Technology and the digital innovation is moving at a very fast pace, right? Related to that question, how are you seeing the human resource moving along? But that seems to be a gap between the pace between the two, and that comes across as a big challenge.
It's quite interesting because I started my career when mini computers were out and PCs were just coming out, and everybody was saying, technology is moving at such a fast pace. How do you keep up with it? How do you solve the problem? The pace of technology change has always been fast relative to where we were, right? And it feels fast. I suspect it feels fast the older we get. That it feels faster, right? and I suspect the younger generation today don't feel that the technology is changing that fast because they've grown up with the technology that we've seen over the last 10 or 15 years. So to them, this is normal. And what they've seen start to change is just an evolution of just like we were 30 years ago. And so I don't think it's necessarily changing perceptively faster than it was historically. We're still on that upward curve, and it's still exponential. But sure, it's changing very quickly. I used to say that technology was like medicine. You couldn't have, I said this back in the 80s, and it still applies today, right? You just couldn't go into technology and know everything. Just like you can't go into the healthcare business and know everything. You have GPs who kind of know a little bit about everything, right? It's kind of how I think about myself. And then you have specialists who know a lot about a deep topic, right? But ask them about something over here, they know nothing about it, right? And you ask a doctor how to fix your well, I used to say DVR, but well, DVR is what, they probably say, no, I have no idea how to do that. That's all technology. And it's like, but they're bright people. Yes, I think the pace of change is definitely accelerating. The challenge for companies today is the ability to adapt and adopt that changing technology. But I don't know if that's any different to how it was 30 years ago. I mean, 30 years ago, bear in mind, companies were coming from manual processes and saying, how do we change this manual process and automate it, right? And it's funny because back then we'd say, well, don't just automate a crappy manual process because all you get is a fast, crappy automated process. And I heard the same thing today on stage. I'm like, wow, this is deja vu. It's just, now we're taking what was an automated process or semi-automated process and taking a clip up and saying, okay, we can automate it even better now. We can put a bot in there, and that bot can do it all for us. And like, that's great. The bot's still going to take your crappy process and just do it faster. So you've got to fix the process first. But bear in mind, you've got to change the process to create value for the customer. That's the big change, right? It's looking at how you change the process to create a better outcome for customers and not just to create operational efficiency. Then the agility that we see that's needed inside companies today comes right back to the formula I shared this morning. Remember that formula? That formula is what's driving the pace of change inside companies today. It's not your competitors, it's your customers and that formula getting out of balance. Because that formula gets out of balance, you start losing customers, you have to change fast. All right, Thanks so much for your attention. So.